Hello, class. Welcome back to Play Analysis and Interpretation 2. In our last lecture, we looked at character in relation to six characters in search of an author by Luigi Pirandello. And to continue on our analytical journey, we will be discussing theme today as pertains to Tennessee Williams's The Glass Menagerie. Now, the play, The Glass Menagerie, was written by an American playwright called Tennessee Williams, and he wrote it in 1945, the year in which the Second World War ended. The time of action, as stated by Tom, is the 1930s, the start of the Second World War, which started from 1939. But then he spoke about his memory from the 1930s, which created an impression that it was a very terrible time with a dissolving economy and all that. And so the dramatic time, we can place it within the memory of Tom as a snapshot of a period from his memory right at the break of the Second World War. The general locale in terms of place is USA St. Louis, and then the specific locale is an alley, and then also the Wingfield apartment. Now, the structure of the play is that it is divided into seven scenes, and it is episodic, even though it doesn't feel like it. It feels like it is flowing linearly, but then it is episodic because we are told by Tom already that it's a memory play, it's coming from his memory. And so they are snapshots of a period, and so the time doesn't necessarily flow continually. He presents the events as he remembers them. So, I mean, it's episodic and it presents the events from his memory as he remembers the events of that period. So, what is the play about? The play Glass Menagerie is a memory play narrated from the perspective of Tom Wingfield. He tells how his father left them and never looked back, and how he took over the father's responsibility of taking care of his mother and crippled older sister Laura. For years, he battles the urge to pursue his dreams of sailing around the world and becoming a poet, and longed for escape from that life of torture. His mother begs him to find a gentleman for his sister to replace him when he leaves them. The gentleman he brings home turns out to be engaged, shattering his mother's and sister's hopes. Shortly after the incident, he is fired from the shoe factory he worked at, and he leaves his family behind, traveling around the world. He is, however, unable to forget his sister and realizes that he is more faithful than he thought he was. Now, when we talk about the theme, we all know by now that a theme is the central idea of a play. That is the driving force. That is what everything else comes together to communicate. So the thought pattern expressed by the whole play. It is variously called theme, super objective, spine, meaning, outlook, worldview of the play, etc. But then within the Aristotelian frame, it is called idea. But we are more comfortable calling it theme because it is the central idea, anyways. So the idea in analysis controls the path that your analysis should take. And so if you are even working with an artistic team, it controls the way you should look at the particular play you are hoping to put up in performance. So, learning to deal with idea is a useful mental exercise in itself, whether you're going to perform the play or not, because the thinking that you go through in trying to understand what the playwright is communicating or is attempting to communicate is a very useful mental exercise. And so the idea lays the foundation for intelligent discussions about a play, because you can't really meaningfully discuss a play just by looking at, say, a character devoid of idea, or a plot devoid of idea, or the language devoid of what it is the language is communicating. So even though character and plots make plays very interesting, it is the idea that illuminates the character and plot. You can't have a character or a story existing without a driving force, idea. So there are various ways that playwrights try to drive our thinking towards what they are trying to say, or towards what the story is about, or the message of the play. The customary verbal devices you find in plays that convey idea are titles, discussions, aphorisms, allusions, set speeches, imagery, and symbolism. All of these come together to help us have an idea of what the play is about. What is the central driving force of the entire action? You can't, even in Shakespeare's Much Ado About Nothing, which is supposed to say, yeah, all of these hullabaloo is nothing. It's not communicating anything. It's also communicating something. It's communicating the idea that we can go about doing so many things and creating a lot of fuss about nothing. There really isn't anything to worry about. Now, so integration of discussions or comments about plays can also happen within dialogue and all that. So there are various ways that playwrights point us to the main idea of the play. Now, one of the main ways we can find the theme of a play is through the titles. Very often you find the idea placed within the title itself. Now, you need to be able to find the linkage between the title and the action of the play in order to try to understand it. You have to think about whether the title is meant to just be taken at face value, or it is a metaphor or an irony that helps us to understand the deeper implications of the play itself. Now, you can find certain titles of plays that just point to the main characters in the play, like Oedipus Rex and Hamlet, or Mother Courage and Her Children. It is about Mother Courage and her children. But is that what the play is about? Not necessarily. It is about them, but then it comments on something bigger than them, which is war as business. And so a title can also reflect both the main idea and the character, as you can see in Death of a Salesman. The play is about a salesman, but then also it's commenting about the death of the common man, which is what Arthur Miller's play is about, where he talks about tragedy and the common man. The fact that the common man also bleeds, the common man also deserves to become the subject of tragedy. Discussions are also other ways of pointing to um, the idea or the theme in a play. So characters sometimes step back from the plot and engage in open discussions or earnest conversations about such ideas as ambition, suicide, acting, public office, forgiveness, honor and guilt, religious religion, and politics. And you can find these discussions in Mother Courage and Her Children, for instance, where the chaplain talks to her about his role in the war and how he can turn people's minds to go and fight without even any care about their own lives. This points to the theme of war. You can also see the father in Six Characters in Search of an Author, where he's talking about his guilt, the guilt, and the fact that people have various consciences and that they shouldn't be held accountable just for one aspect of those consciences. And then you have Tom in The Glass Menagerie talking to his sister about his visits to a magic show and how he himself participated in the magic show, where the magician is nailed in a coffin and he's able to emerge from the coffin, alluding to he himself and the predicament he finds himself in and all that. And then also in his conversation with um, the gentleman caller, what does he tell him about the movies? People go to the movies, they sit there and watch the movies go on, watch people and heroes doing the things they wish they could do. All of these discussions points to the idea of the play, which is an attempt to escape from something very deep, something they are all suffering from. And so discussions are a very useful way to find idea or the idea of the play. Aphorisms. Aphorisms are like wise sayings. It comes from a Greek source, meaning the short statement of a principle, truth, or sentiment. We use this word to refer collectively to axioms, maxims, adages, wise sayings, mottos, sentential statements, all the brief, quotable statements that compress human experience into a concise verbal generality. They are concise remarks about general principles. So, to be or not to be, that is the question. It's a general principle that talks about the dilemma of human beings in general, which is said by Hamlet. This can force you to think or point you to the idea of the play. Allusions. An allusion is a reference to another work of literature or to a person or an event outside the play. It is a way of sending an idea, signal, not only to the listening characters, but also to the more knowledgeable members of the audience. So they give us additional thoughts. And so you may find various allusions in plays. And when you look at the Glass Menagerie, for instance, there's an allusion to D.H. Lawrence's work in the Glass Menagerie. There is also an allusion to Luigi Pirandello's works in Six Characters in Search of an Author. Even though he wrote it, he alludes to himself as an author who writes philosophical ideas. And so when you are reading his play, you have to think philosophically rather than literally and all that. So allusions are just references to other works of literature that can also add meaning to the play we are reading. And so the task is for you to look at how that allusion may relate to the play itself. Imagery is the use of sensory language to represent objects, actions, or ideas. So the air smells sweet. And so when you think of the air, you are linking it to a sensory aspect of your experience, like smell. He could still see her in his imagination using his mind's eye. So the sense of sight, you have the sense of smell. All of these things can give us an idea of the kind of image that the playwright is pointing to And all of these can link us to a better understanding of the play. A simile is a figure of speech in which two unlike things are explicitly compared. She is like a rose, period. But a metaphor, on the other hand, does not use like but makes such comparisons. So it uses a word or phrase that may be linked to one thing, but then it is now used to designate something else or to mean something else. A mighty fortress is our God, for instance. A mighty fortress is our God. You are comparing God to a mighty fortress. You have compared the two. You have linked God to a mighty fortress, but you have not used like. Personification represents a person as an inanimate object, creature, or abstraction. Like art is a jealous mistress. Art is a jealous mistress. A jealous mistress is linked to an art. Art is likened to a person, and a jealous mistress is likened to an art. And you can see in the glass menagerie, for instance, Laura becomes like the broken unicorn. She was the unicorn because she's very delicate. She's glass. She's like glass. She's been isolated from the world around her for so long. She's oblivious of that world. She's very delicate. She's very fragile. And so Laura is compared to the glass unicorn, which breaks in the hands of the gentleman caller. Now we can also see a use of metaphor and simile here, where Tom was talking about how he's traveled all around the world, and when he passes a shop where there is perfume or a perfume is sold, the window is filled with pieces of colored glass, tiny transparent bottles in delicate colors, like bits of a shattered rainbow. Then all at once, my sister Laura touches my shoulder. He turns and realizes it is not Laura, but then he likens her to a shattered bottle. She's broken. She's like a rainbow, but then she's broken. And he knows that she is not strong enough to survive his absence, but he still leaves, and that thought haunts him. A symbol. A symbol is something that is both itself and something more. So a thought sign, like a metaphor, which compares two different things, a symbol automatically associates something with itself. Like when you see the Ghana flag, you know, oh, it represents Ghana. Intentional symbols are those which are there. It's like you know what it means, just like the flag of Ghana. It's an intentional symbol. Like when you see scales, it's a symbol for justice. When you see an owl, it's a symbol for wisdom, even though in other places it might be linked to witchcraft. It depends, but they are very intentional symbols. So when you see symbols in a play, you have to try to link it to the idea. Now, there are also incidental symbols. They originate from the readers and are subject to change according to sensibilities. So, like I said about the owl, an owl in some places may mean wisdom, but then in other places, I mean, depending on your belief, you might say it is a symbol of witchcraft. Now, we can see the fire escape in the glass menagerie as a symbol. It is a symbol that represents all the attempts of the various characters to escape from their realities. Prologue and epilogue also gives us idea about a play. It gives us the idea or the theme of the play. And so a prologue is more like the speech before, just literally that's what it means. And so when you have a small scene representing a prologue, it normally introduces the idea, just like you see in Oedipus Rex. So you get an idea of what has happened before, so that to help you to understand the current situation. And then there's the epilogue, which is more like the speech after. It summarizes the main idea by restating at the end of the play how the play relates to a wider context. They highlight the main idea by their very characteristics as opening lines and closing lines. In Death of a Salesman, if you read Death of a Salesman, you will see that yes, there is no prologue, but then there is an epilogue, the requiem, which happened at the funeral scene, sums up the life of Willie Loman, and it tells you what the play and the general idea is. And then you can find the idea also in characters based on the way the characters are used by the playwrights. So they may express um, ideas that the playwrights, the characters are given certain things to say that will help you to understand what the idea is about. And these are very conventional characters, such as narrators and choruses. Narrators and choruses add commentary to a play, and they help you to understand. They add up to the main action. They offer commentary that will guide you to know what the playwright is trying to say in case you didn't get it in the normal conversation. And we can see how Tom Wingfield does this, where he comes in as the narrator. He gives us the social background of the play, and then also he introduces us to the characters, and then tells us, okay, why don't you observe it for yourself? You will find out what happened for yourselves. But then as it goes on, he comes in and he signals music here and there, just pointing us generally to the idea that this is a memory. And as it's a memory, it's not realistic. I can color it with music, with poetry, with legends, captions, and all that, just to give you an idea of what I see in my mind's eye and the way I remember things. But then he gives us a lot of information, and he tells us even what happens after he leaves home and how he wanders about. Even though he has not left because he is still attached to Laura. And then there's another character called Raisonner character. And so it is also a conventional character. Such characters often know more than other characters. And so they are a type of narrators. But the Raisonner character is one who always remains within the action. He does not come out of the action of the play. Although he participates in the action, the Raisonner has very little direct effect on it. And so, unlike Tom, who is outside and both inside for us to see, the Raisonner character is a doubter within the world of the play. He never comes out. He often offers advice to convince through reasoning and all that. And so it's more like the sound or the voice of reasoning within the play itself. And such characters point us to the idea of the play. And if you have read Kobna Sechi's The Blinkard, you see that Lawyer Onyimzi is a Raisonner character who tries to be the voice of reason within the play. Now, a confidant, just like the name suggests, is a close friend or associate with whom the main character shares secrets or discusses personal problems. Even though the raisonner is close to the confidant, a confidant has very little direct influence on the action within the play, Because others open their hearts to this character, the confidant is more often a trusted friend, just like Mrs. Linden in A Doll's House. She's a confidant. And also, if you read Death of a Salesman, you will come across Charlie, Willie Loman's next door neighbor and a friend. He is also a confidant. So the characters confide in this person. And then you get to um, catch a glimpse of the idea of the play through such secrets as are entrusted to this confidant. And then you can also find the idea in the plot itself. Sometimes you will find um, certain plot elements like parallelism, where you create characters that are very similar or move in the same direction as the main character, or certain relationships that you can find within the plot itself that are very similar but also are different. And so even though they are running on a parallel plane, like father-son relationship, like Charlie and his son Bernard in Death of a Salesman, and then you find Willie Loman and Biff, his son, they are moving on the same plane, but then they are leading very different lives. And it points you to more like opposites. Opposites, because one has trained his son in a certain way, and the other has trained his son in another way, and they have turned out very differently. What is going on? So they serve as foils to each other. This kind of plot element also helps us to understand the relationships within the play and also points to the idea. And conflict in the play normally points to the main idea. Conflict is a plot element, but I mean, based on the main conflict in the play, it points you to the idea as well. When you look at the main conflict in Six Characters in Search of an Author, for instance, you find that it's between the characters and the actors. It's a confrontation between characters and actors, speaking about issues about reality. What is reality? Your reality is different from my reality, and all that. So there are no absolutes. And then you can find main conflicts within the mother and Tom, for instance, where she doesn't approve of his lifestyle because she does not understand his need to escape, to run away from the predicament he finds himself. And she is also escaped to the past where she currently lives, constantly bringing in issues of the past and all that. I'll talk about that later. And then these kinds of conflicts where the main character wants something and something is standing in his way or her way, creating that tension. The conflict itself points to the main idea of the play. And so the logic behind the main idea should be very obvious. It is an effort to describe in a condensed form the basic conflict at the heart of the play, the conflict that revolves around the main character. Because a play is like a biography of the main character. And so, whatever it is the character wants is what you should look at. What does he want? And what is standing in his way? How does this create tension? How is it resolved? This leads you to the main idea of the play. The central conflict leads you to the central idea that is being communicated by the play. So, regardless of the verbal form, it is crucial to state the main idea as a single statement. Occasionally, the playwright states the main idea somewhere in the dialogue, and this is really great when you're able to find it. Then it holds everything together. Then you are able to unravel everything and then bring it back up to the main idea. The task is for you to find that main idea stated in words. and in the many words that are stated within the play. So you have to frame the description in the form of an action summary, a super objective, a thesis statement or sentence, or a theme. Then you have to justify the response with detailed information from the play itself. Now, in the glass menagerie, you can pick the statement that Laura Amanda makes. She says, if anyone breaks a leg on those fire escape steps, the landlord ought to be sued for every cent he possesses. Now, the fire escape there has served as a symbol all this while because Laura is trying to escape from her own reality. She's very shy. She has never been to school to complete. She leaves school very early. She's sent to the business college. She does not finish. She leaves. And so she doesn't have any skills. She doesn't have any education. She's more like somebody who has been frozen in time. And she's Tom's older sister. Amanda runs to the past where she was in Blue Mountains. And she stays there talking about all her gentlemen callers and the life that could have been. That is where she escapes to. And Tom escapes to the movies. He's constantly going to the movies, watching show after show, reading and writing poems, living in his imagination and all that. He tries to escape. But there is no escaping for one who cares, even if he leaves. Now, this is the sentence I have couched. There is no escaping for one who cares, even if he leaves. As you can see with Tom. Now, Amanda is abandoned by her husband years ago, leaving her with Tom and Laura to raise. Now, Tom starts working at a very young age to take care of them, though he has his own dreams. He has dreams, and he could not bring himself to suffer like that forever. And so he leaves, but he's not able to escape because the memories of Laura keeps coming up. And you can see in what he says about the magic show that he wishes he's like the magician. He's wondering how the magician is able to nail himself into the coffin and escapes without removing those nails holding him down. And so you can see Laura and Amanda as the nails holding him down in his coffin. But he cares so much about how to leave, how to escape the coffin without hurting them. But in the end, he finds that he cannot escape without hurting them. He will have to abandon them. But from what Amanda says here, if anyone breaks a leg on those fire escape steps, the landlord ought to be sued for every cent he possesses. It tells us that Amanda does not blame him for leaving. She does not blame him. She understands the kind of responsibility he shouldered since his father left. And he's a young man who has to pursue his own dreams. He cannot stay stuck up with his sister and his mother to continue to take care of them. It is very selfish, just like his father. But living with them and continuing that kind of life, working in the shoe factory, is like death to him. It's like death to him. And so to continue to live like that, like he was already dead, he might as well leave. And so the glass menagerie, the main idea is caring and the tension between escaping from whatever is holding you down, is holding your dreams down. What their father did to them caused a stagnation in their family. But also, Tom tells us about the social context of the war and everything, the Great Depression that came. around that time and how things are hard for everybody. And Amanda says this in her conversation with him, that she understands how hard things are, but they also need to survive. And she is old, and Laura doesn't have any skill and she's crippled. But still, Tom could not bring himself to continue to stay with them. But there is no escaping for one who cares, even if he leaves. This is just one idea from it. You can find other ideas. Sometimes you can come across a sentence that strikes you as the whole idea. I mean, this is the idea upon which the Glass Menagerie is hinged, or any other play you have read. Then you can hold on to that and then now try to explain how each, for instance, if I am saying that Amanda and nobody is blaming anybody for trying to escape, you can see it in what Amanda has said. If anyone breaks a leg on those fire escape steps, the landlord ought to be sued for every cent he possesses, not the person, but the landlord. And who is the landlord? We can interpret the landlord to be so many things. Those who started the war in the first place, the government of the country, their father, the husband who left. And then you bring it down to the one who owns the house itself. But you can expand it to mean so many people. Because in these trying times, anybody who wishes to escape is justified in trying to escape. And when you look at the kind of life the Wingfields lived, it was like a prison they themselves had dug for themselves, living in there. Laura escapes on her through her glass menagerie. She also goes to the movies, but she's always playing with the glass animals that she finds very dear to her. That's how she escapes from reality. She never functions well in society. She goes to youth club, she doesn't survive there. She goes to school, she thinks everybody, she's too fragile. And so she becomes like the glass animals she plays with. And so it speaks desperately of a particular time during the Great Depression when it was really important for vulnerable women to be taken care of, especially those who didn't have any um, career or business of their own. It was very important for them to have a man to take care of them, but there was none. And Tom couldn't find his sister Annie to take care of them before leaving. But the very last image we see, right at the end of it, when Tom said Laura should blow out her candle, we see that the mother has become strong again. The mother has assured Laura that they will be all right. That they will be all right. And so now Tom is telling Laura to blow out her candle because her candle continues to burn inside him. How is he going to move on if she continues to burn inside him? The guilt. He cares too much. He hasn't totally left them. He constantly sees her in every glass window he passes by. Whenever he sees a perfume shop where they have tiny glasses, he sees her everywhere. He carries her with him. But also, he owed a duty to himself, to find himself, to chase after his own dreams rather than to relinquish everything to the family. It is very selfish, but then he also had to do it as a matter of survival because he would have died living in the house. That is what makes it very interesting, very sorrowful, because they are all right. They are both right on both ends. He deserved to leave, but also was it right for him to leave? This is what brings us to the whole idea of the desires of the individual against the common good or the good of the family. like the way we see in A Doll's House, where Nora wanted to leave, and then her husband is drawing her attention to the family, to him, and she's saying she owed an even greater duty to herself, to find herself. And so it points to the whole shattered relationships, dysfunctional families, economic hardship that fell on people during the Second World War, and the kind of society it's created in America. I would like to see what you all think about the glass menagerie when you begin to discuss it in the forum. All right. I'll see you again in the next video. Bye bye.